Hi, and welcome to Why the Census Matters to Health Equity, a County Health Rankings and Roadmaps webinar. The County Health Rankings and Roadmaps program is based at the University of Wisconsin Population Health Institute and is a collaboration with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We'd also like to acknowledge that this program is the result of the contributions of many colleagues and partners in Wisconsin and across the nation. Thanks to their support, we're able to bring you this webinar today. Hi, my name is Erica Burrows-Girardi, and I am an action learning coach with County Health Rankings and Roadmaps. I'm coming today to you from Central Florida, and I'm also joined by my colleague, Joe Hinton in Chicago.
Hi, Erica. Jealous as usual that you're in Florida and I'm in Chicago. I'm going to be the person behind the Q&A feature in the webinar today. So as you have questions, I'll be glad to respond to them or save them for later during our Q&A time.
Thanks, Joe. And I also want to take a moment to introduce you to other colleagues who will be joining us to enhance your learning experience. Carla Freeman, who will be chatting with you in the chat box, is joining us from Georgia. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Erica. Hi, Joe.
And when Carla sends you a prompt to chat in the chat box, please do respond with chat to all attendees and panelists so everyone can see your responses. And James Lloyd, who is at our home base in Wisconsin, is our technologist who will be handling any technology snafus. Hey, James.
Hey, Erica, good to see you. Thanks, everybody. And if you do, you can chat to me privately, and I can help resolve any technical issues you might have.
I appreciate that, James. And now I'm excited to introduce you to Michael Wilson. Michael is the Director of Communications at Lehigh Valley Community Foundation. Over the next several minutes, Michael will be sharing how he and the Foundation's community partners have committed to ensuring that everyone in their communities are counted in the 2020 census. Hi, Michael.
Hi, greetings from Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. We look forward to hearing more from you. Okay. Some of you may be new to County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, so I don't know if you know this, but we have two primary overarching goals. The first is to improve health outcomes for all, and this includes how long people live and how healthy they are. The second goal is to close the health gaps between those with the most and least opportunities for good health. We believe that everyone should have a fair opportunity to be as healthy as possible, regardless of where they live or the circumstances that they were born into. We know that the choices that we make depend on the opportunities that we have. And, if it was our choice, we would all ensure that our children would attend quality schools. We would all live in safe and affordable homes that are in safe neighborhoods. But not everyone has those opportunities. And these unequal opportunities create differences in health that do not come about of their own or because of the actions of some individuals alone. They're often a result of policies and practices at every level that have created deep-rooted barriers to good health for some people. We see this manifest in things like bank lending practices and school funding largely based on local property taxes. That means that not everyone has that fair and just opportunity to live a long and healthy life. And our goal is to correct that. How do we ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive? The census is a start, and we're going to talk about why it's important to health equity. I love this graphic from the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm confident that most of you did not bring in the new year thinking about the 2020 census. But I can promise you that our data team here at County Health Rankings and Roadmaps have been thinking about the census for some time. And that's because we report census data in each of your county snapshots. Equally important is the fact that the data such as birth rates and death rates are all predicated on population counts. So these rates are most accurate when the population counts are most accurate. Consider this: decisions that advance equity rely on accurate death rates, birth rates, and other data. And this is just one reason why the census is so important to health equity. And again, Michael will be sharing how the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation has made accurate census counts a priority because they are absolutely committed to health equity. I also want to let you know that this webinar is just the tip of the iceberg. I want to invite you to join us after the webinar to dig a little bit deeper into the census and health equity. Immediately following this webinar, we will offer an interactive discussion and as a group to deepen our learning. These conversations give you the chance to be face-to-face with other webinar attendees and share what you are doing locally, as well as ask questions of other participants. We're pleased to be able to offer these sessions in partnership with Healthy Places by Design. Joanne Lee with Healthy Places by Design will be our lead facilitator for that conversation. Watch in the chat for details about how to connect, and we'll do that later in the webinar, and Carla will be sending that information out as we approach the closing of the webinar. And also, I'm pleased to say that Michael will be joining today's discussion group, so this will give you an opportunity to chat with him as well. The first census was taken in 1790. The original purpose was to determine congressional representation for our newly formed democratic government. Now, while the census still serves that purpose, the role of the census has expanded considerably over the decades, and data collected from the census are now used to make decisions that influence aspects of our daily lives, and many aspects, I want to say. These are just some of the important decisions that are influenced by the census. And make note of the decisions that actually impact you personally. Now think about this list, or look at it again, and think about those that impact your community. Everything from school expansions and locations to where businesses are going to be located. Decisions like that are all predicated on the census and those census counts. The image you're now looking at is our rankings model. Again, some of you may be new to us, so I want you to know that this model helps us understand what drives health in a community. One of the goals that we've had for this image is to help change the conversation about health and what influences health. What this image shows us is that health is more than just what happens when you go to the doctor's office. It's actually a wide range of factors that influence how long and how well we live. It does include things that we often think about when we hear the word health, like healthcare and how well we eat or how much we move. But health also includes things like education, income, and the quality of our housing and the safety of our neighborhoods. Now what I want to do is overlay our model with those decisions I was telling you about that are influenced by the census. So here are those same examples alongside our rankings model. Take a look at the highlighted measures. Now look at the list of the decisions on the right. So I hope that the highlights on the model just demonstrate how the census can affect decisions that really matter to our health, especially equity decisions like where schools and clinics and road construction projects will be located. So I'm curious, what health and equity decisions do you think the 2020 census has the potential to influence in your community? That's a question I want you to think about, and Carl is chatting that question out now. So please share your response in the chat, and I'm going to ask Carla to lift up some of the responses in a few minutes. And keep in mind, select from the drop-down box, chat to all attendees and the panelists, so that way everyone can see your response. While folks are chatting in, let's take a look at some of the federal programs that are influenced by census counts. Funding supporting these multiple programs is influenced by the census, and these are just a few of the federally funded programs that support residents and communities across the nation. Many of these programs are absolutely essential for people's survival. Therefore, it's important that everyone in the census is counted. And if there's one take-home message that I want you to hear today from this webinar, is that accurate counts matter. So that's why it's so important. Well, enough for me. Carla, what are some of the remarks we're hearing in the chat?
Well, it looks like people are saying federal funding, grant funding, healthcare, funding for housing, local grants, school funding, lots of funding questions and comments. School developments, childcare options is also going in transportation.
Great. I'm glad that folks are starting to see that link, and at least sharing with others that link between the census and what really matters to our daily lives. So now I want to reintroduce you to Michael Wilson from the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation, and that is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica.
Tell me about the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation. First, what is a community foundation and what region do you serve?
Well, the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation is a leading funder of nonprofit organizations in our region. And with more than 250 charitable funds, the Community Foundation helps many individuals, families, companies give to the causes that matter to them. For us, it's primarily in the Lehigh Valley. In fact, we provide nearly $7 million in grants last year alone to improve the quality of life in the Lehigh Valley and beyond. So we serve the Lehigh Valley, which is the third largest metropolitan area in Pennsylvania, behind Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And with a population of over 670,000, the Lehigh Valley includes cities of Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, which are in Lehigh and Northampton counties. So the Lehigh Valley includes an additional 26 municipalities that surround the cities.
And as a reference point, where are you situated in relation to Philadelphia?
So the Lehigh Valley is about 60 miles northwest of Philadelphia and 90 miles west of New York City. And in fact, it's one of the few areas in the state of Pennsylvania that's increasing in population. Lehigh County has grown by more than 4%, and Northampton County by nearly 2% since the 2010 census.
Yeah, and think about that, folks. Some of you are also living in communities that have grown. So the census is so important for all of you, all of us, to get those accurate counts to really see where the population growth is. Why did the Community Foundation get involved in promoting the census?
So last year, while attending a statewide gathering of Community Foundation leaders in the state capitol, Bernie Story, who's our president and CEO, first heard of the concerns about the census and undercounting. And it became clear that Pennsylvania was one of those states at risk for undercounting due to the demographics of the state. It was also an issue that can be impacted through local and regional efforts, which is why community foundations play a key role in ensuring a complete and accurate count. We are by nature place-based institutions in the Lehigh Valley, we happen to be, so we know how to focus our work at the local level. And there was a strong call to action for the philanthropic community, because we know that if communities are starved of federal resources, it will have a ripple effect through government, business, civil society for at least the next 10 years, and set back many of the goals of America's foundations, philanthropists, and nonprofits for years to come. So community foundations and other funders would be hard pressed to make up for the significant loss of resources. So it was a real call to action. You know, and we believe support today for the census will have a high return on investment. And the point we like to make is the census is a zero-sum game. It's not that if the Lehigh Valley loses or has less people counted, that the federal budget decreases accordingly. It's just that the money that will go elsewhere, to another state, to another region.
And talking about that, let's look at Pennsylvania. What does Pennsylvania stand to lose if those counts are like inaccurate?
So in Pennsylvania, we receive about $39 billion each year from census-derived data that support about 55 federal programs. And it ranges everything from investments in infrastructure and technology to supporting healthcare, education. And the chart on the screen now just shows those top programs that you had spoken about earlier and that most people are aware of. You enter this factoid that really gets people's attention. And it's estimated that Pennsylvania could lose an average of $2,093 per year in federal funds for each person not counted, and that's for the next 10 years. And another important point is an undercount also decreases the amount of representation our community has in Congress. So current census estimates predict Pennsylvania to be one of 10 states losing one congressional seat after the 2020 census.
Right. So just a reminder that in addition to these federal programs, we are still looking at those congressional seats, and that's also important. Let's take a closer look at Lehigh Valley and what's at stake in Lehigh Valley if dollars go elsewhere.
So undercounting the Lehigh Valley's 670,000 people would really impact federal funding for every issue we care about here at the Community Foundation, whether it be arts, education, poverty reduction, human services, et cetera. So we research public data for the programs which we know the allocations are derived from census data to see like what are the levels of funding that are at risk in the Lehigh Valley. And looking at this chart gives us an idea. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program receiving over $10 million a year. CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and Medicaid that allows children and adults to access quality healthcare would be impacted greatly with large numbers utilizing those programs. And just in Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton school districts alone, over 30,000 meals a day are served through federally funded breakfast and school lunch programs. HUD's community development block grants are driven by census data. They support affordable housing, public infrastructure improvements and services. And other examples include Title I funding that's received by school districts, transportation funding, workforce development funds, aging in place resources, the list goes on and on.
Yeah. And again, like I was saying earlier, a lot of these programs are absolutely essential to people's survival. And I have to admit that I'm learning something new here because I did not realize that so many of the programs were reliant on accurate census counts, but it does make sense that it would be. So, Michael, why is it important for you to share this information?
Well, the reason I share this local data with a national audience is it's important to localize the impact of the census to get others to take action. When people see the real numbers for services that they use or important to their community, it really hits home and people begin to get involved.
And let's talk about how you all got involved, the types of actions that you took. What approach did the Community Foundation take to address the census?
So as we considered how to best partner with nonprofit organizations and direct our grant making in support of the census, we began to examine census tracts in our region to determine which of those are at the greatest risk for an undercount. So we turned to the Census Bureau's Response Outreach Area Mapper, or ROAM application, that anyone can go access online. We were able to identify census tract areas in Center City, Allentown, on Bethlehem's South Side, in Easton's West Ward, as areas at the greatest risk for an undercount. Most of those areas which had an undercount risk of over 30% based on 2010, as indicated in those dark blue areas on the map. Mm-hmm. So what we did then was we identified nonprofit organizations that are located in and serve the community in these high-risk areas. So we invited a number of trusted organizations to apply for funding. We are funding 4 nonprofits in those communities, some of which I'll talk about in a little bit later. And they are working to increase awareness and engage the community through a whole number of strategies. And when we overlay this map with data points related to impact, we really begin to see visually what's at stake in the areas that need our focus the most in each of the cities and both in the counties. And I think this really ties the two together, both the map of the undercount and then what would be impacted in those areas if we don't get the count right.
It's interesting how you use these different data points to intersect to be able to give you a fuller picture of what is needed in your community and what you would stand to lose. So first you looked at the areas, you used the roam tool. By the way, I'm going to talk to you all about that roam tool in a second, but you used the roam tool to identify pockets where undercounting may happen. Those are vulnerable places where undercounting can take place. Then you took information based on what you know from nonprofits and funding programs and overlaid that. Just want to be clear, that's what you did.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So people,
nice.
When it's illustrated, it becomes more evident to people.
Right. Absolutely. So I bet some of you are wanting to know how you can link to the Roam tool and use that tool to kind of do some of the same mapping in your community. So no worries. We're going to include the link in the resource guide that you will get after the webinar. We usually have that resource guide posted definitely within 24 hours of this webinar. So no worries, you'll have that link and kind of be able to dig into it. Michael, what is your strategy to reach folks that are living in communities that we call like hard to count census tracts?
Sure. So early in 2019, we began to do additional research, initiate conversations around the region regarding the efforts taking place for the census. And as a result, we launched Civic Engagement Census 2020. And we learned from our peers and other national leaders that successful census efforts involve 5 actions. And we made this nice circular chart to illustrate those. Train, fund, champion, partner, and promote. So first and foremost, we're focused on providing funding and training to nonprofits who are located in those areas that are historically undercounted. We also established the Census Equity Fund of the Lehigh Valley as a source of philanthropic dollars allocated to the initiatives. And so at this time, this fund represents the only private philanthropy dollars directed to census work in the Lehigh Valley. We've committed our own discretionary dollars to the Census Fund, and we've been raising awareness among the region's philanthropists about its existence, and we've received additional support from individuals that we are directing to these efforts. Thus far, the Census Equity Fund has enabled us to support the 4 nonprofit organizations that I had mentioned that serve these historically undercounted communities. And we're also funding regional efforts that include training for nonprofits, developing localized census messaging for hard to count communities. We're printing materials, we're supporting media outreach, and we're supporting our complete count committees, all of which we'll explore a little bit as we go on in this webinar.
That's awesome. I hope you all out there in webinar world are hearing some of the strategies that the Community Foundation is employing and thinking about how you might be able to actually implement some of those strategies locally. And so I also want to pause at this point to remind folks, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A box because Joe is monitoring that closely. Michael, what are you doing to champion the census and partner with others in the community?
So we are co-chairing a Lehigh Valley Regional Complete Count Committee in partnership with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. They're an organization that uses data for almost all the planning that they do. We have held 2 meetings so far to discuss a regional approach and to share ideas, strategies, and challenges. And it's been a good incubator for our local complete count committees to cross-pollinate ideas. Our staff is also represented on the 5 complete count committees, and they're in Northampton. There's one for Northampton County, Lehigh County, then Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton. And through these committees, we're partnering with the region's nonprofit, business, and government stakeholders. We're also involved with Pennsylvania's Complete Count Commission, and we recently visited the state capitol to hear updates on the state's $4 million outreach campaign strategies to get a better understanding of how our efforts can supplement what's happening at the state level.
Nice. Planning Commission, nonprofits. I mean, you're covering all your bases. And I love the fact that each one of the cities have their own logo to promote the census. So they're all, invested in this. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about those strategies in detail. What are your strategies to promote the census and drive action?
Yes, so we have held several events and initiatives to build awareness and energize people throughout the region as we are going through kind of our awareness and partnership building phase. Mm-hmm. And so during the fall, we partnered with the Hispanic Center of the Lehigh Valley to hold the Health Equity Summit, Census 2020. It was attended by 120 government and nonprofit representatives, a day-long program with panel discussions and workshops. And everyone, I think, in the area, our region left that highly energized and eager to get involved. Additionally, we held a special program with our Board of Associates. That's a group of 150 community leaders who are associated with the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation. And our program was called Census 2020. It's all about our Commonwealth. And it featured a talk by Norman Bristol Colon, who's the Executive Director of Pennsylvania's Census 2020 Complete Count Commission. So that was also another thing to get people involved and motivated. And, we continue working with the Complete Count committees who have a number of great ideas for generating awareness, both regionally and locally. And tactics include everything from street banners to messaging and utility bills. We probably the most creative idea has come so far from Easton's Complete Count Committee. In fact, if you look on the screen there in the lower right, you'll see we got one initiative that entails using washable paint and stencils to create branded bilingual hopscotch promos on sidewalks in the hard to count communities. So that's one of the ideas that has come up out of these committees meetings and so forth. Regionally, we're placing PSAs in our local bus system. We're doing an advertising blast in March on our 3 Spanish language radio stations. We're printing materials like buttons and window clings, and we're contracting for social media campaign with a local marketing company, Faces International, who's producing culturally appropriate messaging and marketing collateral for the area. And of course, we're doing our best to get the issue into the media, doing television and radio programs, op-eds in newspapers, thought pieces in magazines. We've been contributing to newspaper and television stories in our area, again, to get the word out, get it in front of the community, and get people engaged.
Awesome. I love the idea about the hopscotch. I mean, so that came out of the, and I have to ask you, I know we're not at the Q&A part, but that probably came from a resident, right, in Easton?
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly.
Not sure? Okay. I totally put you on the spot with that, but I just thought of that.
It might have been one of the marketing people that is part of the Complete Count Committee.
Yeah.
It's one of those like guerrilla marketing ideas.
Uh-huh.
How you can get into the community in an engaging way.
Yeah.
That's not intrusive. So it's something that's interactive. So I thought it was just a really great idea.
Well, forgive me for putting you on a spot, but I just think it's so cool, like you said. So, but what are some examples of specific initiatives with your partners that you're undertaking in those hard to count areas of the community?
Yes, so one of our 4 grantees is the Hispanic Center of Lehigh Valley, and they're located on Bethlehem's south side, and a large Latino population in that area. And the center helps low-income community members connect to social services through employment services. They hold English language and computer classes. They have a healthy foods pantry. They help people find affordable housing, and they provide a whole host of other community resources, connect people to community resources. And so the Hispanic Center has a lot of great ideas, and you can see them on the screen here. They're partnering with Lehigh University and Moravian College, 2 Bethlehem area institutions, to create a team of trained bilingual college students to conduct a whole variety of outreach activities starting this spring. The center staff will also share census information with their clients during those scheduled appointments and assist clients in completing the census, and also promote the census on its website through social media channels, as well as collaborate with Spanish language radio station La Mega to help get those messages out in the community. And overall, their goal is to reach 3,000 residents from the 4 census tracts that are in their immediate area through their outreach, and assist 1,000 residents to complete the census. So as you can see that factoid on the bottom, just looking at when we apply that $2,093 per year for 10 years number. So if an additional 1,000 people are counted that wouldn't otherwise be counted, it would mean more than $20 million in federal funding over the next 10 years.
And I love the fact that they are utilizing students from the local college and helping those students learn the importance of civic engagement. So I think that's awesome. Now you're also doing some work right there in Allentown. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Community Foundation has partnered with the City of Allentown and Faces International, the marketing company I had mentioned earlier, on a number of initiatives. And the major component of the overall strategy is to create census hubs in undercount areas in Allentown. And the city is establishing hubs at 17 trusted organizations that are in and serve the community. And the hubs will have welcome areas, provide census information, serve as a place where people can come in and access Wi-Fi or access a computer station, go online and complete the census. In fact, this year is the first year that the census is being offered online, and the Census Bureau is anticipating the majority of people will complete the census online. In addition, 4 census ambassadors are being hired to serve 4 main areas in Allentown. And what those ambassadors will do, they'll coordinate the efforts of the neighborhood hubs. They'll circulate between the hubs, respond to questions from the public. They'll also distribute literature, posters, flyers to businesses, community centers, bodegas, etc. And then they'll be available to speak about the importance of the census at neighborhood meetings. And the message, that we're putting out there through all these activities is completing the census is easy to do. It's safe. The information is confidential and protected by law. And it's important for you and the community that everyone fill out the census. And then lastly, on the slide, you can see, in addition, the city is marketing the census through, going to be using a variety of community events, using digital billboards and social media. They've created the website allentowncensus2020.com. They're going to employ geofence digital advertising, as well as, like I said, putting posters in businesses, flyers, using postcards, etc.
Yeah, the traditional marketing stuff like the posters and the flyers and the postcards, I get, but what is like geofence digital advertising?
So, yeah, so that's when most of people listening now have probably experienced this. When you go on a website and they'll put a cookie or a pixel on your browser, and then as you're going around the internet and going to different sites, ads will pop up that will be for that particular thing that you went and visited. So geofencing is just, you can target a particular area by zip code, by area, by radius, in which you can really zoom in on your digital advertising on a particular area, geographic area. And so that makes it more affordable because you're not advertising to the whole world, you're just really narrowing in on one particular area.
That's so cool. It really is. And forgive me, those of you who are participating on the webinar, if that my little sidebar drove you nuts. I had never heard of that before. So I needed to know, but thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking also here at the map in Allentown, and I know it's kind of hard for our viewers to see. No worries, you can get a copy of the webinar slides on our resource page, but we will also have the slides posted within 24 hours, so you can take a closer look. But I love the fact that they've got addresses here, and you know exactly where all those hubs are. And you said there were 17 of them, right?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. We're looking to get additional hubs as well. Okay. So that map's very fluid.
Good. It needs to be. What advice would you give community leaders who are not sure where to start advocating that everyone needs to be counted?
So first we tell everyone, hey, please fill out the census. Tell your neighbors to fill it out. Everyone counts, from urban to rural areas, all age groups, all ethnicities. It's your civic duty to complete it, and it's something everyone can do. Now for community leaders, we tell them, consider joining your local complete count committee. The Census Bureau maintains a webpage with contact information for every complete count committee across the country. And there are thousands of them. You can see by the blue dots on that map on the slide right there. And so you can go to that site and find one near you and make a connection. If you're not looking to get that involved, you could start integrating census messaging into your organization's work. Every business has a newsletter, social media outlets. Start sharing the messaging. A good resource to check out is the Census Bureau's Community Outreach Toolkit. It has a whole variety of ideas for how people can get involved at a whole variety of levels. And third, contact your local community foundation and see how they're getting involved. There are over 700 community foundations across the country. See if they have a Census Equity Fund. And if they do, consider a gift to the fund. The return on investment will certainly be worth it. And so I encourage everyone to do all those three things.
Yeah, and I think the point here is that there's a role for everyone. There's definitely, like you said, different ways that you can get involved in advocating for the census. Now, these two websites, again, will be on your resource guide. And so you can identify where the Complete Count Committee is for you locally, as well as get some ideas about how to participate in outreach activities by using that community outreach toolkit. So, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your story and these very practical strategies. Don't leave yet, because we're going to have some questions for you. But I want to direct our audience to some specific guidance that fits with our webinar today. The Partner Center is, which you can find under the Take Action to Improve Health on our main navigation bar at our website. It's all about joining with others to make lasting change in your community. It answers the question, who should we work with? And if you think about what Michael was saying, he's um, worked with partners from the Planning Commission, nonprofits, schools, all sorts of partners to be able to get this message out about the census. And so keep in mind that um, community health is something that's owned by everyone. It's a shared opportunity for everyone to promote health. And the census is a big part of that. So you also want to tap into those partners as you begin thinking about how I can contribute to accurate census counts in my community. So the Partner Center is a good place to get started because it provides guidance around why different groups might care about creating a healthy community. Those are the same groups that should be caring about the census. The Partner Center also talks about what they can do and how you can engage them. So again, you can find the Partner Center on our website, and Carla is chatting out a tip about how you can locate the Partner Center. So at this point, I do want to pause and ask Joe, what have folks been asking questions about?
Well, Erica, I'm glad to share. There were a lot of questions. There's a lot of people who are clearly thinking about this as part of their work and about their service to the community. So I'm excited to lift up a few of those questions to you, Michael. One that we received even before we started today was just reflecting on the title of our webinar. So the title is Why the Census Matters to Health Equity. So I'm wondering if you might reflect on how equity was a guiding principle towards the census strategies that you've pursued.
Sure, thanks, Joe. Yes, Census 2020, it's so important for health equity. I mean, it's the underserved communities that are at greatest risk for an undercount. You know, and while census data informs funding levels for programs that benefit everyone across our region, it's really those concentrated poor areas in urban and rural areas that rely on health and human services that will suffer the most due to an undercount. So it's families with children under 4, many times go undercounted, that need access to children's health services, those folks who would suffer disproportionately. That's why it's so important, I think, to direct limited resources to the areas that would be most effective. And that's what we're doing with our Census Equity Fund.
So I'll actually piggyback that with one of the questions that came in from our Q&A box. I think it's that, can you think about help us think about some of the reasons we have undercounts? What are some of the factors that you're identifying that make people not answer or be difficult to reach, hard to count?
Sure. You know, I mean, the number one thing that's floating out there is generally, you know, distrust of government, like concerns about data privacy, confidentiality, fear of repercussions from completing the census. And people live in, you know, a complex household. There's renters, there's people with residential mobility. They're less likely to complete the census. And then that belief that completing the census may not benefit them personally. You know, and that's part of the reason why in our messaging, you know, we must convey that the census is easy to complete, the information is safe, it's protected by law, and it's so important that people complete it so that we get the federal funding and representation that we need.
And I'd love to lift up in the Q&A box, we had people putting some great thought into thinking about people who live in alternative housing, trailers, living in cars and vans, experiencing homelessness, multiple people, multiple families in a single family dwelling unit, Amish populations in rural areas. So, you know, there's a whole array of different approaches, I'm sure, that you have to think about in order to accomplish.
Yeah, the hard to count populations, you know, there's a long list of them. But again, like racial and ethnic minorities, people who don't speak fluent English, undocumented immigrants, legal residents, refugees, and the poor, like in the homeless and mobile individuals, certainly really hard to count. But there are strategies in place that the Census Bureau is employing to count those people. So there's a huge effort going into that. But again, you know, there's a whole variety of personal reasons people may have, and we're trying to overcome those with our messaging that we're getting out to the community.
And one message I know that we want people to hear is that the census is all about being where you live. You're a resident of this country. We're not talking about legal documentation. We say if you're living here, you need to be counted.
Yeah, so in fact, April 1st is Census Day, and that's important because the census is going to start inviting people to complete the census beginning mid-March. And then, but April 1st is important because that's the day that people look in their residence, the people completing the census form, and see who's living or staying in this house, apartment, or mobile home on April 1st. So it's where do people live or where are they staying on April 1st. So if it was a college student who was living on campus, they're going to be counted at the college, not in the residence. But then anyone else living in that, whether it's a traditional family, non-traditional family, people who may be living with another family in a home, counting all those people are important. And really the questions, you know, people have a little fear. We've been trying to demystify what the questions are so that people are less apprehensive. And really it just asks people, you know, is this a house, apartment, or mobile home? You know, they ask for a telephone number. Then for each person staying in the residence, they'll ask your name, of each person, age, date of birth, race, what if they're of Hispanic origin, and then how they're related to the person completing the form. And that's it. There's no citizenship question. It's not going to ask about immigration status or anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for those questions. A few of them that came into the Q&A box were really about the messaging, and they lit up as soon as you mentioned that magic number of $2,093 that could potentially be lost per person who was not counted. So people were wondering about how to construct those messaging points for their state. It felt like a really effective tool. So I don't know if you have any insights on how they could go about building that message.
Yeah, those numbers are out there, and I've been looking around the internet at a whole variety of states, and a lot of states have come up with that similar number. And what they're doing is they're taking the total amount of federal dollars that they receive and then divided it by the population, and then you get that amount that's coming per person. So presuming it's the same. You know, it's very similar counts in each of the states. It varies, you know, some are 2,000, some are more, some are a little bit less, depending on the level of state funding the states receive. So those numbers are out there for everyone to find. And there's a source for that study as well. I don't think I have it in front of me now, but there's actually a source, I think George Washington University study of those numbers that provided a lot of that. That's one slide I showed, 39 billion in Pennsylvania. That came from their study.
And no worries, if you happen to find it, just let me know, and we'll pop it into that resource document.
Yeah, I was surprised, but not surprised how much that message inspired people. They really want to think about that. I think that is one of those things that helps with the communication method. So another kind of general thread in the questions was about funding. How do groups approach funding for doing census outreach work? There were some questions about the Census Equity Fund. There were some questions about engaging different workers, like community health workers. So I'm wondering if you can just reflect on maybe some of the funding questions, or maybe some of the partners that you've engaged that have really made a role in this.
Yeah, so a good place to start would be with your state government. And each state has a complete count commission, similar to the one I mentioned in Pennsylvania. In fact, some states, they're putting a lot of resources towards it. California, 190 million. New York, I think I heard 60 million. New Jersey, I think is like 30 million. So those states that have a high, hard to count population, they're really investing state dollars in getting an accurate count. So that's a good place to start. In fact, in Pennsylvania, they're doing a $2.5 million media campaign, but then they're putting $1 million out to localities that are working in these areas where you can apply for state funding. So that's one place to start. And then looking to community foundations, I had mentioned before, contacting your local community foundation. I mean, we're foundations that have charitable funds and that can set up a charitable fund for specific purposes, and then raise money or get money in, to support those things are a great way to go. And so partnering with your local community foundation is another good way to go. So those would be on the funding side. I think are good ways to approach it, looking for funding for things. And again, it's those complete count committees. Some cities, like the city of Allentown, has put money, and same thing with Easton, money from the city government. They put money into it to able to expand their outreach and the programs that they have. So there's a whole variety of areas funding's coming from, both private and public.
Yeah, I appreciate that response, Michael. And I'm even reflecting on a message you shared with us offline. One of our other questions was about engagement in rural areas. We think a lot about making sure count happens in urban areas. And I know that you had some success with rural outreach and some funding.
Yeah, so we're actually applying for one of those state grants in conjunction with the Lehigh County, Northampton County Complete Count Committee, and really looking to augment what we're doing, in the cities with a broader approach. And a lot of times those rural areas, while the population is less dense, are identified as areas that have low count areas as well. So important not to overlook all regions, really. And that's why we're doing more region-wide advertising and approach, at the same time doing concentrated, targeted marketing as well. You got to cover all your bases.
I gotcha. And I have to tell you, the questions that have been coming in, everybody's thinking about all those bases, the partners, who is the tough people to count in our community. And so I hope that some of you still have questions that you feel like are unanswered will come to the discussion group. But I'm going to turn it back over to Erica. And thank you, everybody, for all those questions.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. And yeah, Joe is absolutely right. Please do make a point of spending a little bit more time with us to talk about this in more detail. I learned so much as I was preparing for this webinar, and I hope that you all have as well. If you look on your Zoom window, toolbar, it's either be at the below your screen or the top of your screen, you're going to see like a raise hand tool. Will you raise your hand if you learn something new? I hope I'm not the only one. But I mean, I can't use the toolbar, so I'll just raise my hand. Thanks, Joe. Because I actually learned a lot about the census, and I was going to participate in the census anyway, but now I'm even that much more determined to make sure that I participate and my friends do as well. So thank you for raising your hands if you have learned something new. Our hope is definitely that you have learned some information that can support you as you begin to think about accurate census counts in your community. And but as for this webinar, please let us know how you did. How we did rather. Carla is chatting a link to a brief feedback survey. I'm going to ask you to open the survey with that link so you can complete it later. But hearing back from you is the one way that we know what topics you're interested in hearing. It's also how we know what we can do to improve the quality of our webinars. And we definitely respond to that feedback to make our webinars better. So I encourage you to complete that survey when you have a chance later on today.
Hi, Erica. I just want to let you know I saw a peak of 160 hands up. So that was fantastic.
So I wasn't the only one. Thank you, James. No. Michael, you have really helped improve my learning around the census. So again, this is just the start, folks. We got that discussion group that is right after the webinar, and Joanne Lee with Healthy Places by Design will be facilitating that discussion. In fact, she's in the audience right now, and I know she wants to know what you want to learn more about. So I'm going to ask James to launch a poll, and please share what you would like to dig into a little bit more in after today's webinar while Joe walks us through the poll.
Thanks, Erica. And I'm still over reading questions in the Q&A box, but for some of you, I can see you're already answering. So we're just looking to learn a little bit more about what we might discuss in the discussion group. And we've got some great stuff in the Q&A box that can carry over. And I can see some of you are selecting that you want to share what your community is doing to promote accurate census counts. And I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from that. You would like to learn more about strategies to ensure that populations that at risk for undercounting are included in the census. That seems to be well in the lead in what I'm seeing right now. And the final option is to, you want to learn more about creating a Census Equity Fund. You can select more than one answer, and we'll let this poll go for about 15 more seconds to make sure we get as many responses as possible. And I am going to close the poll and let all of you see that there is tons of energy about learning about more strategies to think about how to include the at risk for being undercounted populations. So that's
Great.
terrific energy.
Yeah. Yeah, so join us for the discussion group so you can chat more about that. I'm actually hoping that folks will be sharing what they've been doing, because I'm sure some of you that are joining us, they've already been kind of doing some of this stuff. So if you are able to share one of the strategies that you're using in your community, will you please consider joining the discussion group to be able to share your strategy with other folks. So again, and also if there's another topic, I mean, there's other things that we can discuss as well. If there's another topic about that, please do join us. Carl is going to be sending out the link in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to encourage you to stay in touch with us. We have a presence on Facebook and Twitter, and you can learn more about our upcoming webinars and our latest tools and resources by signing up for our e-newsletter, which will be in the resource document that we're going to share with you. So Joanne will be joining you shortly in the discussion group, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Carla to chat out that link to the registration for the discussion group right now. There's a couple of questions you'll need to answer rather, and then you'll be popped into the discussion group. But before we leave today, Michael, I just want to give you an opportunity to share anything else that you might want to share. I want to say, first of all, it looks lovely in Allentown today. So is there anything else you'd like to share before you join everybody in a discussion group?
Well, it's actually overcast today, but it's temperature-wise, it's not too bad for the Northeast. So, but yeah, I'm just it's everything like this. Like, I'm so thankful for you guys doing this, and because we've been living the census for the past 9 months. And so it's great to get people energized and engaged across the country. You know, it's the one civic thing that we do, that we all do by law, that we're required to do to a certain extent. And the other thing is voting. So those are the two big civic things that people should do: is vote and, of course, complete the census.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I want to give a huge thank you to you, Michael, and to my awesome colleagues who support us with webinars month after month. Our next webinar will actually be in March, when we will be sharing with you how we are preparing for our rankings release. So please join us in March for that webinar. It'll be all about rankings, and we know that you are just as excited as I am, because Joe, this is our 10th release of the rankings. So we're like all excited about it. But anyway, thank you all for spending some time with us. Go ahead and, if you would, fill out that registration and pop into the discussion group. And I will see you all in March. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.